Hello?
You guys got quiet all on your own, so that must mean you're ready to get started. Thank you for coming out on this warm Sunday afternoon. And we're just grateful to see that community members and district folks and teachers and school counselors and folks who care will take time out of their Sundays because it's the summer and we're supposed to be relaxing and doing yard work, which is not relaxing. But this is very important to us, and we know it's very important to you. So this is the second to last forum that we're having. This forum the Not Without Me forum was supposed to be one event, and the first event, over 120 or 130 people showed up, and the conversation and the time that we had, the 2 hours that we had, it went so quickly, and we felt like everybody had so much more to say and we had so much more to learn that we would make this into a series and continue. And you have continued to show up. There's new faces every time. There are some of the same faces every time. And each time we learn a little bit more and we get a little bit deeper into what it's going to take for us as a community to help be engaged and be involved in the success of our students and our children, help them to become successful adults, and help them to understand that we care about them, that no matter how challenging their every day looks like, we're here for them, and we're going to walk them through the process of graduating and moving forward to the life that they have in mind, and a life that fits within this community, and where they can contribute in positive ways, and where we can move forward in positive ways in the community. So thank you for being part of that. This conversation started back in November with School Board President Nancy Humbles and I. Nancy said we have to do something. We have to figure out how to get these parents more involved and community members more involved, because this is a dire situation. And the teachers can't do it on their own. The school admin can't do it on their own. The district can't do it on their own. We need to come together as a community and figure this out and work together. And so we started with really wanting to hear the parents' feedback. And in the first forum, we had a mixed group. We had district people, we had teachers, we had parents, and we had community members and nonprofit organizations at the table. And so we got to hear all of their voices. In some of the sessions, we focused on just hearing the voice of our youth. And we just sort of asked the same questions over and over again. What is the ideal situation for parental and community involvement? We had a panel of principals here, and we asked the same questions. What's getting in the way of that ideal state for parental and community involvement in the education system with the youth? And then finally, what kind of solutions do we have? What ideas do you have? What do you think is going to work? And so we've had community members, parents, students, teachers able to share what they think will work, what things are getting in the way, and what they would like to see moving forward. So we're pretty excited today to kind of summarize and wrap up what we've heard over all of those sessions, and to talk to you today to get kind of any final ideas or input that we might have missed, and to prepare ourselves to present to the school board in September to say, this is what the community members are saying, and this is what we want to see happen. So after this last several months compiling this feedback from various stakeholders, we've heard your concerns, ideas, and comments, and so this is an opportunity to clarify those things. If you weren't able to attend any of the other forums, this is an opportunity for you to add your voice to what the information we've gathered, and if there's some clarification needed or some points that need to be defined, then we can do that today also. I was supposed to probably introduce myself before I started talking, so I'll do that now. My name's Rachel Rockville, and I've spent the last year at Hoover Elementary School as Community School Coordinator, and I have been at the Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation as the SET Fund Program Officer, and SET stands for Safe, Equitable, and Thriving Communities, since February. I'll be transitioning to that role solely after August 11th, but I have learned so much being in the school building this last year, and I have had the privilege and the honor of getting to know students and parents and teachers and admin at that school, and really being sort of immersed in the challenges that are there, right? And really am motivated to help the community figure out how we can do the best by our kids. So thank you for letting me co-facilitate today. And here's the second co-facilitator.
Hi, Anthony Arrington. I am just a regular old community member. I'm born and raised in the Cedar Rapids School District, and I'm really glad to be a part of this. Again, I'll echo what our co-facilitator said here. We've been at this for 6 months now, and it's been interesting. We've had some uncomfortable conversations. I think we've had some raw conversations, and I think we've looked under the hood as much as we can. At least we think that we've looked under the hood as much as we can to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about these challenges? Because if we don't do anything about these challenges, we are all sink, because we are all in the same boat. So at the end of the day, the question is not to point the finger at the school system, not to point the finger at the community, not to point the finger at the parents, because everybody should look in the mirror, point the finger at themselves and ask themselves, what can I do for we? Because there's not one of us in here that has an answer. And I'm just as guilty as the rest of us in this community of being complaining. And that's okay. We're supposed to air our laundry, but then we got to clean it up. And so the question is, what are we going to do? We keep coming here, the choir keeps coming, what can we do together? And I've been overjoyed to be part of this process, and I'm looking forward to presenting the results to the board, and presenting to the community, and figuring out what we can do together. So thank you guys for continuing to be a part of this, and I look forward to hearing voices today as we kind of look under the last rocks and see what we can come up with. Thank you, Brad.
Okay.
So this is going to be real informal, right?
Yeah. So today is real informal. This is really the opportunity for you to, you're here because you have an opinion, you have thoughts, you have passion around youth. And so today is really an opportunity for us to gather that. So what we came up with when we were looking at all of the information, all of the responses, because we took notes every time, we put them into spreadsheets, and then we had committee meetings. I don't know how many committee meetings we've had looking at this, at least 15, right? To try and understand what we're hearing and to kind of guide the next session so that we're digging deeper. And basically, when it comes down to it, we've come up with 4 different areas that we've heard from consistently throughout the last 6 months from everyone, all of that. So the 4 key areas are communication, relationship building, volunteer and community engagement, and access to funding. And so we've got these up here. And what we want to do with this information is to be able to present it to the school board in a way that we can say, here's some recommendations as to how as a community we can improve the results for our children when we're looking at involvement, engagement from the community in the education process. And so to be a little more specific, it's more around like, how can the district and the community stakeholders develop better communication? So what we've heard is the methods that are using, the content, the audience, like there might be a different way that we're looking at it if we're communicating with students. And also making sure that the communication can go both ways, right? How do the students communicate with their teachers or with the admin team and that type of thing? So I'm messing up, we have a facilitator's guide here and I'm just messing it all the way up, right?
No, you're fine, you're fine.
So do you just want to switch back and forth?
Excuse me for a minute.
Yes.
Is there any way y'all can turn the light on so they
Yes.
can show up more clearly?
Yeah.
Thank you.
These sheets here are what's on the screen.
Oh,
And they're going to jot down notes.
Yeah, this is very open, this is very, very informal, yeah, absolutely. So the goal here was really just to open these questions up and really open the last opportunity up. So when we thought about communication, how can the district and the stakeholders develop communication, including the methods? So we've heard from parents, we've heard from students, community organizations, administrators, and so the question is, as you recall over the last several weeks, at this point, are there any other ideas that we've missed? Are there any other thoughts that you have? We wanted to be able to have this discussion openly and consider any of the other thoughts that we've had. We've talked about the student groups. We've talked about parents groups. How do we get parents to school? We've talked about several of the organizations. Yes?
So from a parent standpoint, they've always had some difficulties with the school remembering that, like they communicate on Power School and Canvas and stuff like that. Sometimes the teachers in the community, they forget not everybody has Wi-Fi. Not everybody has access to their computer in their home.
Yep.
And when parents work 8, 9, 10 hours a day and they come home, put the kids down and everything else, they don't have to go to the library to read all of this stuff
Right.
or to go through it. And as far as like, I know I've had one educator tell me, well, if you have a smartphone, you have access to it. No, we don't. Just Canvas doesn't work on your smartphones.
Mhm.
And Power School definitely does it.
Right.
So in those rounds, when we were going over communication and trying to figure out a way to keep parents informed, the students informed, and everything else, kind of remembering not everybody has the same resources as everybody else.
Yep, and that's been a big conversation that we've been having here. So I think what I hear you say, and anybody hadn't lived with this, but smartphone technology, we need to continue to use that. But we need to find another method as well.
Right.
I thought I heard you say that Power School doesn't work on smartphones.
It doesn't work now.
So to me, that's an opportunity for us to figure out a way, because every platform should work mobile. And so I know that in our business, in my business, so we should figure that. So that would be something to do, one specific action, is to figure out a way to make the technology work on smartphones. But also outside of technology, right?
Right,
What
there's
else?
some people that don't even have smartphones.
So I think we took a few notes on that, but what would you, do you have some ideas? Does anybody, I mean, I'm open this up to anybody. We want to take these last notes down.
You can use the old tried and true method of contacting people when there's mail. People could come by people's house, if necessary, teacher can come by with five or 4 times. So there's some old tried and true methods, I mean,
Now.
Yeah.
that you can use to keep people informed. I mean, if you really want to contact people, we all found a way to, we all, just like our not yours for campaigns, we still put leaflets indoors.
Yeah.
We got computers and stuff, but we still walk by people's houses and we told them, we put literature in their door. And most of it gets thrown away probably, but that's what we do.
Right, and I think that's been a bigger,
More meetings. Like,
What's that?
we meet with our teachers like 2 or 3 times a year for conferences, but why can't that be more throughout the year? Like, hey, this is what we're doing. I mean, we have the PTA meetings, which are great, but what about other meetings? They're just like, this is what your school is doing. This is what we need parents' involvement in. What is, so they get both communication from parents and from everybody instead of just meeting for parent conferences or just the PTA meetings or something outside of those. Like,
so
is
more,
there
so more parental meetings outside of your standard PTA
Yeah.
meetings. And I know that we've heard that over the last several months, as well as the time, right? The time of day.
Yeah.
We've talked about that as well, because of working parents, with the time. Good idea. Your name? Maxine, thanks. Have you been on this before?
No, I didn't
Awesome.
know they existed.
Okay, so is there a database,
Go ahead.
is there a database that has students, their addresses, parents' names? Okay, so could that database be used to know who does have access to wireless platform and those who don't? Like you can send out a test, say if you respond good, if you don't, then we're contacted by someone. So you don't.
I think Noreen might have something to
Okay.
say. Yeah, she's over here listening.
So one, thank you for the feedback. My name is Maureen Bush, I'm the interim superintendent, and we are transitioning. I am so glad that you brought this up because we've struggled with our former information system of providing access to all in multiple ways. Power School is a great tool, but we're finding with the district our size, we needed a different opportunity. We're transitioning to a new tool called Infinite Campus, which does have a mobile app accessible on your telephone, and a better reasonable, it has much cleaner data for input, which a better database, so that we'll be able to generate a process at every school. I think what we need to get better at is asking the question, how would you like your information?
Yeah.
So if we could calculate, so if we could have a process at all of our 31 schools, because registration is still pretty locally owned, because your relationships with the school, not with the Edgewood Road building, and so, right, that we could generate that in a process that's streamlined for the district. We could work with our registration process for that.
What's the name of the new
Awesome.
site?
Yeah.
It's Infinite Campus.
Infinite campus, I'm sorry, one might be able to.
I was gonna say requiring home visits, like what Bernard.
Time out. Gotta say it,
Sorry,
gotta
Kelly
say it.
McMahon, and I teach kindergarten at Blue Girl
Hold on, you guys gotta say your name and what you do.
Do I have to see him? Kelly McMahon, I'm a kindergarten teacher at Blue Girl Elementary School, and things I would say, because we have the issue of a lot of our parents don't have computers at home, and so when we're doing our registration, probably somewhere between 10 to 17% are using the generic email address that we provide to complete the registration process. So home visits are huge. It's something that all preschool teachers are required to do, and you can make accommodations if parents don't want you to come to the home. You can find a meeting place in the community instead. And so we started doing that as part of our conferences this year. Also, instead of having all the meetings at the school, bring the like PTA meetings and other community like school events to the neighborhoods. Like bring it to a meeting place where more people can come and have like be able to provide childcare and stuff like that. Because we can't just assume everyone's going to come to the schools. We need to go where our families are at. So that's what I'm
Absolutely.
Molly Donahue, teacher at large right now and also state representative. I just want to add to what Kelly said. We also have in our district, and I know other districts do similar things, it's called PLC, time on Friday afternoons. We could have something, and I've thought about this, call it TLC, periodically on Friday afternoons, where teams of teachers who work with certain students that are needing more contact go out to the home as a group to talk with the family.
TLC.
It'd be TLC, not tender love and care, but teachers, leadership, and community.
I love it. Teachers, leadership, and community. So a sort of a periodic home visit plan.
Particularly with the ones that are in more need,
Right.
you know, and that you can't communicate any other
Right.
way.
And is that something that can be funded and transported?
We already have meetings, so we just
We
need
have the
to
structure.
Okay, awesome.
So the teachers who have that particular student that may need some extra meeting time with family and community help, or with the teachers, anybody who teaches that child could go to the home.
Anybody know that? I just learned that today. Anybody else know that?
Metro used to do that.
That's cool.
And it was kind of a built-in thing at Metro.
Let me stand up. One thing needs to happen, despite all the all the technology that we want to put on base, we should emphasize the human contact. Even with people who have computers, there should be a requirement that there's a face-to-face meeting with folks.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing that's happened in school that involves communication could be a kid acting up, or even a kid changing classes. It should, this should be part of policy. I've had parents over time talk to me when their kid acted, well, I ain't gonna deal with that. I'm gonna deal with the parent who was trying to change their kid classes. She had like 10 teachers come in and gang up on her. I mean, those kind of things have to stop. Or my brother had kids in school district, when his kid acted up, 10 teachers would come in the room and they would gang up on. That part of the communication has to stop.
So more one-on-one.
Well, I mean, even if there's a problem, it don't take, I mean, the situation, it becomes a very adversary, and this is what my brother told me. He said, and this has been years ago, his kids are, he got grandkids going to school, but he said there should not be an adversarial relationship between the teacher and the parent. Now, we come from St. Louis, all for black people, we kind of understand the adversarial thing, but when a parent comes to school, they should not get ganged up by all, they should not be ganged up on by the faculty of that school. Right. Like, I got in trouble a lot when I was in school. The whole school didn't come in. It was the principal and the teacher and my parents. It wasn't. And something else I want to suggest, on parent teachers conferences, and this may just been an anomaly, but my experience, the conference should be between the parent and the teacher. I would go to a teacher conference with my friend, and she would spend time trying to talk to her daughter. And what I told her, what you need to do, I will take your daughter, we will go to the other room so you can talk to the teacher, so you can get some information. And usually the kid was used as a way not to answer the questions that need to be answered, in my opinion.
So more transparency.
Yeah, so those kind of things got to be done differently.
Right. More one-on-one. Okay. Yes.
Sorry, can I add on what you're saying?
Yes.
Like, that literally happens to me almost all the time with my son. My son is autistic, Tourette's, on IEP, and so forth. And there was a period of time where my son would get into his moods and he'd freak out and he'd leave the classroom. As his teacher couldn't leave the classroom, my son was MIA for 20, 30 minutes. And nobody knew where he was, nobody could go check on him, nobody could go get him. I repeatedly asked for a parent for him. They have told me he's not dangerous enough, he doesn't need it, he's not severe enough. I have multiple teachers, because he eventually did get moved into 2 classes where co-taught teachers. Those 2 classes he is completely excellent. I mean, he's getting work done, he's not behind, he's perfect. But the other 2 classes that are just the one teacher, he still failed it horribly, like really bad. And when I called an IEP meeting, I was brought into a room with multiple teachers who all attacked me like, you don't know what you're talking about, this is not where he needs to be, if he's that bad, then he needs to be in the special autistic class, he's not severe enough to be in this, he can be in the general class, but he needs that extra help. And instantly they want to, nope, that's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. I went and got a 4 Oaks worker. At one point, the 4 Oaks worker during one of the meetings had to tell him, like, hey, whoa, guys, stop. She's just trying to see what she can find out. See, it is still happening today, where parents are brushed aside because they feel they don't know anything.
So that solution is more one-on-one and more cultural competency in that area to understand how to communicate with the child, right?
What do you think, so the situation is what it is. What do you think a better way, or how could it have happened better? And I think the communication and relationships are so close that we're kind of going on both, which is good because they're very related. But when we're thinking about that relationship that has resulted from those interactions that you had where you felt ganged up on, they had something they needed to communicate, you had something you needed to communicate to be able to educate your child, right? Right. But what do you think a better way, or what needs to happen so that parents aren't feeling that?
I think, honestly, to tell you the truth, I also worked with like behavior kids. I've done daycare for years, foster care for years, all this stuff for years. And I think a big problem is some of the educators, as wonderful as they are so used to working with the parents that school's a daycare. They don't care, that whatever, doesn't matter. When you actually have a parent who's fighting, who's advocating for their child, they're instantly thought of you're just attacking us because your kid never does anything wrong or anything, and that's not the case. No, like I've had to tell some teachers, like, look, I'm never going to come to you and tell you, well, my son he probably did do it. But why did he do it? Look at the reason that he did it.
Looking under the hood. Looking under the hood. All right. That's good. That's great information. You got a question?
Yeah, because my kids are out of school, been out of school, but I had to go through the IEP situation.
Michelle Edwards.
I'm sorry, Michelle Edwards. Mickey. And the biggest thing that I thought, and I've always thought, is she brought brought it up, is to have an advocate. A lot of times you don't realize that you can bring somebody else in. You always think you need the father, you know, or the mother, the parents. You never think, or it's never implied or told, you can get someone to come in and help you advocate for your child. Someone who knows the system, so I don't know if there's anything set up for that you, but okay, then again, that's part of communication. It needs to be told, because I mean, my children are 35, 34, and 31. Thank you, Jesus, they're all successful, but we had to go through that process to get them there. And a lot of times I was on my own.
Yeah.
I was on my own and had to fight them.
And my son is 13, he's been on an IEP since before he started
Right.
school. And I didn't learn that you can go to places to get help until I actually told my daughter, because I have 2 special needs kids. And I was complaining to my daughter's therapist about how I had asked for her to be evaluated because she was in 2nd grade and she was reading at preschool level. And everybody kept telling me, oh, it's normal, it's normal. No, this is, she should be able to write her name.
So we've got, sounds like we have a solution, so it sounds like we've got,
Okay,
so
yeah.
we've got some educators here that may have solutions.
I've taught special ed for 29 years. And first, I want to apologize if you've ever felt like you are on the, you know, the bad end of the meeting, because the fact of the matter is, as a special ed teacher, my parents have always been a team effort. I mean, it's a team effort to get their kids through school, because that is our goal, is to get them to be successful in school, whatever that takes. The other thing that I apologize for is the funding, because a lot of times they say no because it costs more money. And they don't have the money to give. So if you need a one-on-one, sometimes you have to push them a little harder, because the money's not there. But there is that advocate that you were just speaking in, and it is something that you can get, you just have to ask. Brentwood AEA provides those, so they can help you navigate those waters, so you know what you can do and can't do at the time, and all the steps in between before you get all the services that your son needs, because there's going to be some other steps in between.
So it sounds like we need to be, if I'm hearing, we need to be a little more proactive with
That's what I'm
letting
saying,
people
like,
know
once-
that information.
once
Because you didn't know,
Right.
you didn't know.
Like now I do. Like
And
now I advocate
I
for
know
people.
some parents feel ganged up on because there's 10 people in the room. That's the law. We
No, I don't
have
think
every
we
child
have the
that.
amount of people, it's just how quickly they threw away my concerns. Like, oh, no, that's not necessary, oh, no, you don't have to do that. Well, you don't even let me finish a sentence before you tell me that what I'm asking for is not needed.
Right.
That's the part that bothers me.
And again, you're supposed to be part of the team, we're supposed to be part of the team, we're supposed to be working together to make that happen, so I apologize for whomever you're working with. But I want you to know that as far as the numbers, if that ever becomes a concern, it is actually the law. Whoever works with your student has to be in the room.
Yep.
Awesome. So you have.
So I just have a suggestion.
Stand up, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Elizabeth Hire. To make it more collaborative, McKinsey's been great with working with my son, and they asked me, like, what do you think? What do you suggest? What might help? What helps? Asking for my advice. Because I'm his parent, and the parent knows best. They know their kids better than.
So more collaborative,
Yeah.
more collaboration. Yep.
I think I suggest that.
I'm sorry, real quick.
So I'm Angela Henderson. I have a student at Erskine and one at McKinley, one soon to be at Brentwood. I feel like the teachers don't really get to know the students well, and that's a major issue, like when it comes to their education. Because I know the teacher doesn't really know my son very well, and she thinks he's fidgety and stuff because he has a behavior problem. Well, he's bored. He's the type of person who needs to be pushed to do more, because he's like, I got it, I'm ready to move on. But, like she's complaining about him tapping a pencil during a test, and I'm like, he's nervous, it's a natural thing. So I think if maybe we could have something where the teacher can get to know their students a little bit more. Kind of like just get to know their personalities a little more outside of the classroom, not in like the classroom atmosphere, but just to get to know they're just a little bit. Because, it's hard to tell when you're in a mass of 35 people, hey, it's just, hey, stop doing that, we need to do this. But if he gets bored easily, or this person has nervous tics, and,
So are there some, so I'm hearing, I'm a solution guy, and so the solution is more, so are there opportunities for parents, for teachers to train on relationship building skills.
Yeah, or just have
Whatever
something like
that is,
before
right.
school starts.
And if there's,
where it's just
and
the
any of the
teacher and
educators, if
the
there's something here that, when we bring this up, if there is a solution, let's talk about
I'd like
it.
to-
All the classes.
Yeah. We did some surveys at Hoover over the year, and I think that almost more than anything, what came out of those surveys from the teacher's perspective is that they would really love the opportunity to be able to get to know their students and even their families, their students and their parents better. I think it's mostly an issue of time. Because they're on contract, they have these hours, and they've got a lot. But I think as far as at least from Hoover's teachers, they understand the importance of that relationship and getting to know the kids and getting to know more about their culture, their backgrounds, and their families. There's just not the time and space to do that. But thank you for bringing that
So
up.
maybe the opportunity is some sort of task force to find out how to find time. Maybe we could write that, just like a.
Maybe it's money to pay
Maybe
for
it's
the time.
It's money.
Real quick, I got a suggestion on situations that require more than one teacher to be in the classroom with a parent and their child. There should be one person designated to talk, and the rest of the people in the room keep their mouths shut. And if they have any inputs, write them down, and that person is talking. So that way, it's not like it doesn't it's not like a gang up session. And also, the school district paid to participate in the white privilege conference, and how much did that information from the white privilege conference have any effect on the overall operation of the school? Now, I brought a book from Eddie Moore. I suggest everybody read it. White Women's Guide to Teaching Black Boys. Okay, and again, one of the underlying issues of this whole problem is racism. How do we eliminate racism out of our school district? And could we be one of the first districts in this country to begin to decouple it? Because that is linked to the underlying problem of this, everything we're talking about. And then how do we, and when a person comes to work, you may not be able to change them, but when they're in the classroom, they know, my job is to teach this child. And it'd be nice if I liked them, but I don't necessarily have to like them to do my job.
Right.
And my dislike for them and my myth of superiority should not carry over into my delivery to services for the child, because I'm being paid to deliver services.
So what's the last round of racism? Continue to address those underlying issues.
And the work has begun, but I think we can't say, oh, we did this, we did the
Right.
IGI, and then think that everything was solved. But it has to be an ongoing, and in the beginning, I think even in the first couple of years, with the amount of time or energy that's able to put to that outside the classroom, it's only scratching the surface, right? It's starting to build awareness that this is even a thing, right? Well, even I'm like, oh my, like, really? This is how I'm actually seeing things and responding to certain situations because of my belief systems. But it can't just end there. Everybody in this entire community, it needs to be an ongoing process and keep going deeper. It can't just end checking off the list saying we did this training.
Now, I'm gonna say that the most blatant things need to be called out and dealt with.
Yep. Question here, your name?
Rita McCord, and I teach in kindergarten at Hiawatha Elementary.
Please stand up when you talk so we can hear you.
Sorry, Rita McCord. I teach kindergarten at Hiawatha Elementary School, and so a long time ago I read a book called Believe, and then I took the implicit association test put out by Harvard, and then I went to the White Privilege Symposium, and then I took an amazing class this summer that Madison teaches on that book by Eddie Moore Jr. that I can never really quite remember the title of in right order.
White Woman's Guide to Teaching Black Boys.
That's right. And there are some super, super powerful stories in that book that will make you cry. And but more importantly than that, I really reflected on how do we do that very thing and put more time in the day for relationships. Thank you. And that's it. And so one of the things I'm going to do on Fridays is invite my parents to come in. I think it's important that my students see that they are loved by their families and see how they belong to somebody and how we all belong. And so instead of just a regular community circle, which I do every single day, so every kid has a voice in the classroom, they're going to come in, they're going to have a menu of things they can talk about, you know, like a funny story about their student, or a cultural, I teach also in an ELL building, so a cultural experience or holiday maybe that's unique to them that they want the rest of the kids to know about, and something else. But anyway, so, but having the time to take that class and reflect and put that personal plan in place is super, super critical. And when we fill up every single Friday's PL with work, and don't give teachers time to breathe and come to these things and listen and reflect on what you're saying and really take it to heart and really try to put a plan in place, it's detrimental to that whole thing of community building and bridging gaps. So I really appreciate having that time to do that. And that class had us take the IDI. But I think the most important thing about the class that was about that book, was the class, was the sharing of, oh, we found this, we have a shared thing where if we found an article or a podcast that related to these structural racism issues, we would put it on there, we would listen, we would really dig deep. And so I think that's just taking that IDI may not be enough. You know, I think this class is kind of, I hope I'm not signing you up for something. Cheap.
Real quick,
Sorry. So.
You getting that? You getting
Well,
some?
I want to just pause for a second. Then, no, sorry, don't forget what you're saying. I want to write something up here, but I don't want to like take. If we're thinking about recommendations, I think what I'm hearing is that the district and the leadership at building levels need to make building relationships and strengthening relationships, whether it be with the students, the families, or a priority. So needing that the time and that space exists for that. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Making it a part of your job description.
Teacher self-care.
And teacher self-care also. Yes.
Jessica.
So 2 years ago, I moved into a position where I teach ELL now. And with that blessing, it was a blessing because I went from having like a lot of students to 66, now 22. Because of that, I do home visits all the time, like it's just second nature. If one of my kiddos is in crisis because they missed the bus or something, I can drop everything and go help that kiddo. Like that is the flexibility I have in my schedule to put my students' well-being ahead of whatever else is going on. And my team was like, yeah, go, get them. But I was in an environment where that was important. I think we need to stop, putting sayings up on walls and start being real about what needs to happen. Our kids need to have us in their homes, and parents feel comfortable with that. My kiddos do, that's feel okay with that. Our teachers need to get to know their kids, but they can't have 180 kids and get to know their kids. That's just not possible. When I taught science, I couldn't know my kids as well. So we just need to, as a district, say, it is important for our kids to succeed, and the way they're going to succeed is we're going to allow them, the teachers, the space to have relationships with their kids. And when their kiddos are in crisis or the family's in crisis, you can be there for that, make that a priority. 2, I teach in a very diverse building, and there's only 2 of us at the conference, which is insane to me. So why don't we make conferences like the white privilege conference a requirement and not a suggestion? I go to all of these because that's what matters to me, but it shouldn't be if it matters to you, it should matter to you, or you shouldn't be around kids.
So I think I heard making sure that there's adequate training opportunities that are a little more mandatory, and that we're looking outside of the traditional training box, and looking for other opportunities. So that was a great comment.
Yeah, it was great, but kids need to be our center. Kids are our center, and we make it a priority, and we give space and time for that to the teachers to make that.
This is awesome.
I'm Amy Mokel. I teach special education at Hiawatha Elementary. Previously to that, I was a special education facilitator at Pierce Elementary, and I oversaw a program with kids on the autism spectrum as well as kids with learning disabilities. And that was my favorite job ever, and I think it always will be, because I was able to do the things that Jessica just described. And some of the things that the parents have been asking for. I was able to do home visits. I was able to pick kids up that missed the bus. I was able to pick parents up and bring them to conferences. I was able to connect them with the community resources that they needed. That job has been eliminated in the district. Those of us that had that job, we were told that we were the best of the best of special educators. And there's about 12 of us. And so that job is just gone. That support is gone, and it has negatively impacted so many of our families. And not only do the special education families need it, all of our families need it. Hiawatha is one of the few buildings that has a gen ed facilitator left. He's amazing. What he does is not sustainable. This man is running himself into the ground. He visits the trailer park that feeds into our school constantly. Everybody that lives out there knows who he is. They know what kind of truck he drives. They know if the weather's bad, Joe's going to come up there and make sure that those kids are in the storm shelters. We need that. We need that in every single school. Not only do each teacher need time, we need bodies to do it. It cannot just be on the teachers. A person has to be able to do those things. It is too much to ask for a teacher to do all of that.
Absolutely. That is a great segue. That's a great segue into our very next topic. So this is perfect. But I also want to say before we move on, I know this is great conversation, and I don't want to lose any of your ideas. So if you have something, you can think about it later before today. We're going to put another piece of paper down there, and then you can go up and write it. So I want to make sure, because I want to respect everybody's time. So I'm going to take a couple more, and then we got 250. We're going to move right on to question 3, which is volunteerism. So I think I missed you earlier.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I just want to know what ELL is.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't have an idea what ELL was. Sorry. You guys are using acronyms and
We have too many.
I'm not in the I don't know. So, okay. Prior to that.
Again, when you speak, can you stand up so that we can hear you, please? Thank you.
I'm Kim Smith-Taylor. I'm a grandmother in the district, and went through the district myself and had students, and my daughter and son were in the district. But I was going to speak to this young lady here. I come from a long line of people who have ADHD or ADHD, who are digit. I myself was a doodler. I've been doodling all over everything. But my grandson would get Fitbits or fidgets, and why is that not something that the school could have? So if the pencil is bothering the teacher, do something that's quiet. Give them something you just need something to get their hands, and it's access to funding. But when she said that, I'm like, I relate to that because that was my children's problem.
ADHD tools.
Most teachers provide those out of their own pockets.
That's what I'm saying. So that's funding. So that's funding. That makes
One more real
sense.
quick, and then we're going to, yep.
So it kind of builds off the webinar I said in Unity. So when it comes to relationships, not only is it in the middle school and high school level where you have 60 to 80 to 100 some kids on your rosters, but in our elementary schools, our daily schedule is not structured in a manner that is developmentally appropriate. Kids in K through 3rd grade should have no fewer than 2 recesses a day. Recommendations from the American Pediatric Association actually calls for 30 to 60 minutes of active activity every single day. And so for our kids who come out across as being fishy, it could be, they just need to get up and move, and we need to be giving them more of those opportunities. Which goes into class size. When you have kindergarten classrooms with 30-some kids in them, which was Hoover's experience 4 years ago, there was schools this year that had 27, 28, 30-some. You can't get to know the kids well enough, and that goes all the way to 5th grade, to know what their triggers are. What is it that's happening in the classroom? How did I approach the situation? What was the direction I gave? What was my tone of voice? To do a really good analysis to identify the antecedents of that child's behavior, so that way we can intervene and change it so that way we are being more culturally relevant and responsive to the needs of the child. And being aware of the biases that we're bringing to the classroom. Also, school board policy. We need to be really examining our school board policies at a district level to make sure that they are not feeding the school to prison pipeline. Some of our discipline policies that we have in place. I'm sorry, I'm not a teacher that's ever going to send a child to the office or call a parent because they're tapping their pencils, because, well, they need to get their body moving. So I tell them maybe tap your feet quiet, or here's a tool that I've purchased that you can use. We need to be training our teachers and how to handle those things, which means that we have to have ongoing, really good professional development, but it can't always, how our calendar is scheduled right now, when you look at professional development, an hour and a half on a Friday afternoon, we're all tapped out, we're done for the week. Our brains are thinking, okay, we're trying to have ready for Monday. Like, we're exhausted. It's not ideal. So we have, that involves the community piece. How can we work together, come up with a dream calendar that allows us to get effective professional development, so that way we can also have time to plan, but also meet the needs of our parents. That way we're not putting you all in a situation where you're possibly losing wages or your jobs because of childcare situations. So that's the segue you need to do.
Good stuff. That's a great segue. That's a great segue.
Well, yeah,
And
it's
I
always
think-
about what's best.
I think someone said it earlier, teachers can't do it alone. So this is where we're at now. And I want to turn it over to our other facilitators here and let her tell you, Rachel, kind of about our volunteer plan for the next forum.
Okay, yeah, for our the last forum, what we're going to do is we're going to invite in, hopefully, volunteer coordinators or whoever is in any building in the Cedar Rapids School District who works to match volunteers with an opportunity to be here. We're going to ask that community organizations, nonprofits who are in the schools doing programming and could use the help of volunteers to improve that, to be here. We're going to ask that community organizations that work with our youth, and maybe they aren't in the school buildings yet, maybe they don't have a partnership with the schools, will come here and share those volunteer opportunities, and that we get as many people signed up, and with the point of contact who will be following up with them, so that as we go into this next school year, that there are more bodies in the classrooms. There are more people in the schools reading with the kids. There are more people with the after-school programming. It would take 2 hours a week for someone to do an after-school program 1 day a week in a school. And if we had 5 people who committed 2 hours a week, then we could have after-school programming for more kids 5 days out of the week. So I think it's really possible. But as we wrap this up, this is where we started. When we talk about community engagement, we're talking about parents, but we're also talking about community members and community organizations. There are a lot of people who care about our kids and have programming set up, but they're doing it on their own, or it's 1 or 2 people, or they've been doing it for 15 or 20 years, and they need some new energy. They need young folks who want to come in and spend time with young folks, because I'm sorry, I love kids, but they don't want to see me. They want to see someone that has about 20 years less than I do, right? And so we really want to shift towards that. And so there are some things that some recommendations we can make around volunteer and community engagement, how to improve that, how to make access easier, how to make sure that our kids are still safe while we're making that access easier. And I think these things have to happen first, right? The communication has to be there, those positive relationships. We can't have new volunteers or parents coming into the schools and they don't feel welcomed, because they're not going to come back, right? And so these are things that we have to build upon, but let's kind of move here and talk about these opportunities. Also, any of you in the room, if you have connections with organizations, whether they be grassroots organizations or well-established nonprofits or organizations that are in the schools that you're familiar with, please make sure that you're letting them know that they should be here at the next forum, or give us their names so we can write them up here so that we can call them and invite them to make sure they're here, okay?
Make sure that they on that list.
Yes, we should. They on that? August 25th.
August 25th. So we've collected several of them. Again, as we talked about today, last voice, we want to make sure we haven't missed any. So we know several organizations in the community and several individuals. So if you got ideas, please give them to us.
Yes, Mickey, that's fine.
Yeah.
just coming from the legal aspect of things, do you, when you have volunteers, do you do a background check on every volunteer? You do, okay, because that's,
Well,
again,
there's a yellow sheet that they fill out, but our background check's done on every single volunteer.
So we have
The Raptor system is something new that's
That is a new
great,
system.
but it's not exactly a background check.
Well, it checks against the sex registry.
Okay.
So that's the first thing that it does. Complete background checks in regards to criminal behavior. No, we don't have all of that. It's if someone's on the sex offender registry list. That's what the Raptor system checks against.
and so that's the only background check we have.
And then there's the yellow sheets is a person's name and their information, and then their disclosure, self-disclosure of what they've experienced or not experienced. The Raptor system does the sex offender registry. Well, and I guess also anything that has to do with a crime against a child.
Okay.
So if a parent wants to volunteer, do they have to, even though they're a parent and they're volunteering in their school, they have to go through the Raptor system? Is that
Yes.
part of it? Okay.
Yes.
But if a parent is an ex-felon, let's say, whatever, that's not sex crimes related, then, and they don't report, then there's no way that we would find out. And even if they do report, that doesn't mean that they're not eligible, or even a community member, doesn't mean they're not eligible to volunteer in the schools. So they could be an ex-offender and they can still volunteer. We ask that they self-report on the yellow sheet. The principal or leadership in the building could use their own discretion and say, no, right?
And the complication does become for large community events. Let's say it's a show choir event. Anyone can come as long as they pay and be a volunteer, especially if they're with another school organization. We have this inherent trust that you're checking your volunteers, we're checking our volunteers, but we don't have that comprehensive of a system yet, I would say, anywhere within our community.
Does that answer your question?
It does, but it poses, that's my second thing, is those volunteers that, again, my children have been out of school, but I have grandchildren, I have nieces and nephews. Maybe those volunteers can do some of that, getting to know the student, and we can, pass the, have some training for that volunteer, pass them along to the teacher, because the teacher doesn't have time to do all that, but that volunteer has time because they're sitting in the classroom, they're watching that child. That volunteer, if they have time, would then encompass them into the meetings. And another thing, parents, I don't know if this is in the why you do, when you go to the houses, have multiple parents, people go with you. It's a safety issue. Every house is not safe to go to, and you've got to have multiple people. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So if you feel ganged up on, well, they don't want to be ganged up on either. And there are some parents, even though they may not be here, that do not take kindly to anyone coming to their house.
I wrote down two things. I want to make sure I captured what you guys said, just to make sure. I think I heard background checks. Kind of what I was hearing was make sure we have a process to check but not create fear, so that we don't scare away people that think because they've been in jail they can't, they don't realize it, right? And then more volunteer training.
Right, so they will do some of the stuff that you're asking the teachers to do, the volunteer.
I will add on to that, and I'm just talking from experience at one school, is we have a volunteer coordinator, but she only works 2 hours a day. Most of those 2 hours are spent doing volunteer work, like work of volunteers, and the other amount of her time is spent capturing the hours and putting them into a spreadsheet. So I know not all schools have volunteer coordinators, not all schools have full-time volunteer school coordinators, and even the ones who are there might be doing more volunteer work than coordinating. And so my recommendation would be that there would be volunteer coordinators in as many schools as possible, and they do the work of recruiting, engaging, doing orientation, and training for volunteers. At least at the school I was at, there was no orientation for volunteers, and there's no training whatsoever. And so volunteers, if we're gonna have people in the schools and working to help us, they need to have some basic understanding of how to work with youth, how to be safe with youth, how to be positive with youth and help kids go in the right direction, because we don't want to be doing harm, right?
Maximize the volunteerism.
Right. So I'm really bad at tracking hands.
So, I'll be really fast.
Please stand. Thank you.
First one, when you're talking about like volunteer communities, there's a program called Kids on Chorus. It was in Van Buren. That program helped my children tremendously, and I talked to Beth Millicky personally to find out what we can do to put that in more schools. And there's a lot of backgrounds that have to be done, a lot of backwards. Is there any way that maybe more people can volunteer to help her to get that extended a little bit?
So how many schools is Kids on Course in right now?
Oh, just extended.
I run the middle school, summer part of it, and then, so I'm like, it's part in my blood. What?
It's all fun.
Yeah, it's all fun. But volunteers are fine, like, I run the middle school summer camp, and I like have to beg people to come in and work with my kids. So it's just interesting, you know, because I guess when you get to middle school, it's kind of a forgotten age.
They start going down, like once you're in elementary school, everybody is on board, let's get them going, let's get them, then you get to middle school, it's like, oh, you're okay, maybe you might get to high school, you're like, figure it out.
Yeah, so if anybody, I'm gonna be selfish here, if anybody here wants to come in the summer and help my kiddos out, you know, haven't seen me, because I take as much help as I could get, but I think right now we're spreading to Hoover. Yep. But it is funding based, you know, we're privately funded by people in the community. Right. And it does take a lot of money, you know. The thing that's good about it is Beth, I believe, is like true to her core and her belief in making things better. And she works really hard to make it better. So I can't imagine her spreading really thin.
Yeah.
Without doing
I'm
it.
a walking advertisement for that program, like that program helped my family, my kids. And we truly believe, like, I can't help these kids if they're struggling in the household.
Yeah.
So let's fix it all.
I think if we're gonna make a recommendation around that, if we're really thinking about recommendations, that Kids on Course and the school district have a wonderful partnership and have for many years, and that when those wonderful partnerships and those results that we're getting, and we see those, to make sure that we're focusing on continuing to support those and continuing to expand those, so that any one organization isn't getting burnt out, like, or their funding is to the limit, or they're not feeling like the partnership is true. So like, to continue to, it might be around relationships with those excellent partners, to get them, help get them volunteers, help get them funding, and maybe match funding, and expand to the schools that they're not. But I think that it's a great example of a wonderful partnership with the community organization that is working and is helping our kids.
And then just one more thing I wanted to actually do. Why not get high school kids involved in volunteering? Because like right now I'm trying to get a tutoring program started where teachers, parents can come in and volunteer to tutor the younger kids. Tutoring younger kids is great on college applications. So why not have the high school kids come in and volunteer?
Yep, I wrote it. Got it right here. Use students.
Yes.
Students, good one.
And maybe
Use
if we're
students.
doing that, students are overwhelmed and busy too, especially when they get to high school, if they've got sports, and then maybe there's somehow they could get some credits or some stipends or something like that.
Print something out at the end of the month.
Can someone please explain what Kids on Course is? I'm sorry.
I don't know Kids on Course is an organization that started by Zach Johnson, who is a professional golfer. They do it in schools. They give academic excellence. They help. For instance, my family. My own experience. My daughter. I play instruments. My daughter they bring these usually for like a week or 2 weeks. They'll bring people into the school, and after school, the kids can choose what they want to do. My daughter chose violin playing. She went in, she picked up a violin, and was able to mimic everything the teacher was doing. Teacher thought it was wonderful, contacted me. I would like her to play. I can't afford it. Kids on Course will pay for it. They bought her instrument, and they paid for her lessons for about 3 years until she left the school. Same with my son. He picked up a drum, was able to mimic it. They paid for drum set and drum lessons until he left the school. On top of that, my daughter, she's not eligible now because she had to leave Roosevelt, but she started Kids on Course the year that Kids on Course went into school. I can't believe, and she might know better, but I can't believe that at some point they ended up getting a scholarship. So had she been able to stay in Roosevelt or another junior high, a scholarship would have followed her into high school. They do after-school tutoring. They do after-school, they'll pay for if your child is struggling and needs additional help or additional people to come into the home. They will help. On one occasion, my lights were turned off because I owed a $900 bill because I wasn't working. Kids on Chorus paid that bill to help my lights get turned back on so that the family was not struggling so we could take care of the kids. Pretty much any need that the family needs, Kids on Chorus attempts or tries to help that family win, which I understand why they can't stretch themselves thin in order to continue to do that with everybody.
In a
But it is
nutshell,
an
yeah,
amazing
they really
organization.
teach kids that have, that don't learn in the traditional classroom.
Thank
Give them
you.
alternative
Thank
ways
you.
to learn.
And I
Yep.
do what.
Yeah.
Well, I could talk here a month, what I saw in 4 weeks. But if you're going to have volunteers to train, you need to know what a teacher wants and expects from a volunteer. You don't want any and every Tom, Dick, and Harry in your classroom. Parents, you don't want everybody around your children.
So, identify what we want in volunteers. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christopher Johnson. I'm a professor at Cole College. I teach in the education department and African American studies. So my question is, if I want to be more involved, if there's not a volunteer coordinator, how can I, so I teach class on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I could go into the classroom and help if someone needs someone to read to.
Fight over here.
Not only that,
I would say.
bring some of your co-friends with you.
Yes.
I would bring like students or other professionals. But they would need some kind of incentive, like community service or something like that, so they could get hours or. But I do have students in the teacher education program that would be interested. But we just need to know who to talk to. I remember once I talked to the principal at Cleveland, and she was like, "Just come out and like." They just need to see someone that looks like me because there aren't very many African American teachers. I used to be a teacher, and she said just come out. And so I just want to know how I can get more involved because there isn't like a coordinator person I can talk to. They're like a lister or email says we need someone in this school to do this or that.
School leaders.
Don't worry, yes. Yeah.
Get your name here.
Here's the other thing I would suggest is like, what are you passionate about? Like, what do you love to do when you're not working? Or why are you teaching what you're teaching? So like, do what you do what you're passionate about, because our kids need that. And then also the same, ask your students about that. Like if you were to spend some time outside of the classroom working with youth, what would you want to do? What do you feel like you needed to know, or who you needed to know when you were a kid, and be that. So don't try to fit into something else, but like, absolutely, I think that we're gonna get your information.
Yeah. That goes for anybody. Sign up over here. So real quick before, but I wrote the specific thing down, build relationships with colleges and universities. Do we do a good enough job of that? Because there's plenty of probably people like this man here. So I wrote that up there.
Thanks, because that's a good segue to what I was going to ask. I'm Keisha Burke-Henderson. I'm the Director of Diversity and International Students at Mercy. And so one of the things that I went into a school, we had an event to recruit students, and I asked the same question, how can I get involved? And so they really didn't have a point person for me to talk to. So if I'm talking to anyone here in the school district, that I would say that would probably be a good place to put some funding, is to have someone to coordinate that so that there can be a point person that someone like, myself and you can go to and say, well, we have a group of students, and this is what we can offer, this is how many students we can offer, how many hours we can offer, because I can probably do a great job of recruiting at least 10 students this semester. Wow. Who could be in the classroom, and including myself to give a couple of hours. So the thing is that there was no person, for us to talk to. So if there and communication somehow. So like I don't receive any letters. I receive all kinds of stuff from politicians. And so the thing is, you know, why not in my mailbox, there's something from the school district saying, hey, you know, would you like to volunteer? You're a good citizen, you think you have something to offer. You know, there should be more communication, I think, too, to community members that also offer time. And if I could just back up to maybe some of the other points, just real quick. I just wanted to offer this and say that, you know, I didn't grow up in an ideal situation in New York City, but I can say that old school methods do work. And I had, I think, a wonderful elementary education that set me up for even some of the adversarial things that I faced moving forward in high school and some other situations. And most of my elementary school teachers were white. But it was the 70s and the 80s, and they were radical. And so, you know, the thing is that there's something to be said about a well-rounded teacher who cares, who really and honestly, truly cares about the students. We had class sizes of 27, 28 students. That was a class size. They knew every one of us by name. They knew our parents. Some of them knew my aunt and my uncles by their first name. We were an immigrant family. And so I'm just saying that to say, I understand now times are different, and your curriculum and the board standards and all this other stuff, but at the end of the day, your job is to educate students. And at the end of the day, it's, I think, and I'm just going to try to radicalize some of my counterparts here in the school system and say, take ownership of that. You know, take ownership of how you do that, and then demonstrate that, look, this is what we need to shift in the way that you're thinking about the system and the curriculum and mandating us to do, because this doesn't work, but here's what I did this year, and this does work.
Yeah.
Right? And so we had, I would say our students were really successful. I was just reflecting on this a couple of days ago about the people that came out of our classes, and they were really like smart people, right? Because our teachers really cared and just, they did everything with us. And they took time, and we stopped in the middle of the day, and she had us go walk around, and we went outside and we picked leaves and talked about things, and they took us on trips to museums all the time. Like that was part of who we were. And so I'm just saying, you know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Now get back to the 70s. Get back to the 70s. I think my booty hurts. Very, very good stuff. Absolutely. This is awesome.
When she was talking just on me, Rockville has used to have a database, I don't know if it still exists, where as a teacher I put in, these are my needs, like I want someone to volunteer with my robotics kids or something. And then it would match, some of that database would match my needs with the volunteer. It'd be something as easy as having some kind of database, or as a teacher, because I don't even know who to go for if I need help. You know, if I could just put in, you know, these are my needs as a teacher, and then some community member could look at that database and go, oh yeah, that's perfect, I could do that. You know, the time matches up, the need matches up, bam, we're done. And it's not a stretch. Just like you said, do what you care about. Don't be forced into something else, because that, again, takes more time for the teacher.
United Way used to have something matching system like that, but I wonder if they still do. I wonder if we could take it over.
That's the community.
But communicate it getting used, so then people know that it's out there to be used. Right.
So please stand up and speak so we can hear you. And one person talk at a time.
Okay. So she was just saying we need to communicate that that system exists and that this is something that we should all use, right? Or could use.
Yeah, I know nonprofits use it. We use it all the time.
I was going to say that everyone doesn't have to work with kids also, because if you need someone to input that information to the database, or to, like you said, drive around and drop leaflets or whatever, that's another thing you can look at, because some people may not be the best with the children. But if they could assist the school in doing the things that need to get done,
That's great. That's that part you were saying about the volunteers.
Yeah.
So somebody can do the back office administrative work. Maybe that's a student who loves Excel,
Right.
wants to get some school credit.
Yeah, exactly.
While they do the real volunteer work.
Yeah.
That's a very good, kind of got that one. So
Or making a phone call. Some people
Yeah.
don't like to make
Yes.
phone calls,
Right.
and if you've got a list of 30 people that need a phone call, then someone might be willing to do that also. Thank you.
So I think the volunteer thing, we also, I'm teaching you, by the way. But we also get people to understand that we need volunteers who can just be there with the students, who can help support the teacher. Sometimes volunteers think they gotta be an educator to go volunteer in school. They gotta have this background, they gotta have a degree. They don't have that. So, but for all of you that are part of the community, we need community people that not just come and talk, but we need community people that are willing to sign up to be volunteers in school. Some of us have been in school, I've been in school for the last 2 years, working in the schools. But we need some folks that are willing to show up. Cole used to have a program with Jane Boyle, where they had a group of volunteers come from Cole. 30 years ago, they had an active program of volunteers from Cole College. It's been over 30 years ago, it's not there. But we need people who are willing, if it's an hour a week, if it's 2 hours a week, whatever it is, whatever you can do. We need people that will sign up and not just come and talk about it, but be about it and be there for the kids.
So I think specifically, I wrote down, promote just being there, making sure they know they don't need to have a degree of any sort.
Right.
And we've got connections to the universities. I think I wrote that down. We need to build relationships with colleges and universities, try to resurrect whatever that 30-year program was.
Could be as simple as reading a book or having lunch with your kid. It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
So what do you think? Should we move to the?
Yeah, so good stuff. Again, if we didn't capture anything, we'll put some more paper up here. You can come and write it or let us know. But we're going to move now to, this is all good stuff. Communication, relationships, volunteer, or paper.
So in our last committee meeting, we were pulling together what this last session would be. And I knew that like each piece, kind of when it came down to it, there's not enough time, there's not enough money. So is what is always the reason why we can't do that, or why we tried that, it didn't work because we didn't have the time, we didn't have the money. Also, my experience in the school over the last year is this is a common theme, right? But also I've had a couple of experiences over this last year where I realized there's money out there. There's money sitting out there that we are not accessing as a community, and I don't know exactly why, right? And so this one, it did not really come out of all of the other 6 sessions. This one came out of why aren't we doing these things already? What are the obstacles to these things happening? And it really comes down to the teachers have a contract, they get paid a certain amount of time, they have this much time to do what they're doing. And they have requirements, mandatory requirements of what they have to do. And so we need community members, we need volunteers, we need community organizations to help us, but the funding isn't always there, right? We need Kids on Course to expand to every school, right? We need to be able to support parents in the way when they're in crisis. We need to be able to help with transportation. We need to be able to help with all of these things, but there's no funding. So one of the things that when we were talking about access to funding is, as far as I know, the district does not have a grant writer, someone specific to writing grants at the LSC building. I don't know why. People from the state who have funding for this community have asked me, why doesn't Cedar Rapids School District have a grant writer there? Also, when opportunities are coming up, it's like, how do you don't have a process of deciding, like, how do you know if you're going to pursue this or not? And also, I think there's a little bit of fear around pursuing funding that is specific and targets certain demographics, our students that are struggling the most, because they're afraid that someone's going to say, well, you got $3 million for our poor African American kids, but you're not doing anything for these. And I think we have to stop being afraid, and we need to go after this money, and we need to make this work, and not use any excuses. No more excuses, right? And not being afraid, because what affects the kids that are most in crisis and those families that are most in crisis in our community is affecting every single person in this community. And so we have to keep that in mind. So that's my soapbox. So now for you guys. Go ahead.
So this is one thing that I don't want to get yelled at. Stand up. Okay. Jennifer Borcherding, I'm on the school board of Cedar Rapids Community School District. So this is one thing that I will talk about. So something that I've learned these past 2 years being on the school district is school money is incredibly siloed by law. So the one thing that I just would so encourage everyone in this room to do would be to support legislators that support public education. And that's really where a lot of it starts for us. We can only use certain money certain ways. Education as a system, our funding that comes from the state is not in line with the same kind of funding that's going into the private sector. It's been attached to the cost of inflation, so it's very difficult for us to find funding to adequately and appropriately pay our staff. We really need to be in control of that conversation that we're having and what we're advocating for at the state level. And I am trying. I think our district is trying. You know, we're kind of growing in that area, which will be fantastic. Something else that is on the agenda that's a possibility, we'll see what ISB does with it and what UEN does with it is
everybody
weighted
has
funding.
no idea what.
Yeah. Okay, ISB is the Association of School Boards, so there are lobbyist groups, it's like all the associations of school boards across the state, and then UEN is the Urban Education Network, and they represent like Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, Sioux City, our more urban districts. So something that is on their legislative agenda, whether or not it gets selected for pursuit is not known yet, would be weighted funding for ELL in Everest populations. So hoping that our lobbyists and as a group that we can get together and push that this year. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Up in North Clayton, a long-term goal of everybody should be to put education in the state constitution, that every child in the state of Iowa has a right to education. Basically, education is something we do as haphazard, so that needs to be put into the constitution, that every child in the state is entitled to an education and a certain amount of funding. And the problem is with the allowable growth. And the legislature jabs around with that. Now, most legislatures in this area support increasing funding. What we have to do is deal with legislatures outside this area who don't agree with this. And during legislature, we ought to plan a big field trip to Des Moines. I mean, when I say a big field trip, as many citizens from Cedar Rapids that we could get and fill the rotunda up to say, these are things that we are concerned about as far as funding our kids. That would be a immediate goal, but long term is that education should be enshrined in the state constitution as a right for every kid in this state to receive an education no matter what their zip code is.
You mean free education?
No, we're not talking about free education. We're talking about a right. Currently, the reason why the legislature can do, but say for instance, if it was in the Constitution and the legislature decided that they did not want to do allowable growth, people could go to court, they could go to court and challenge that lack of funding. And they have a moral grounds to go to court. And I'm not talking about free education, I'm talking about the absolute right to an education, because in this country, students, and y'all can fact check me, education is not a right in this country. It's not a right, it's assumed that it is, but it's not a right in this country. So wherever you happen to live at, whoever your parents have to be, wherever your resources happen to be, that determines whether you get an education and get a quality education. So that's what I thought. It should be enshrined in the state code, not in the state code, but in the state constitution. And that's a lot of work. I mean, that's a long-term goal. That's a lot of work to get the state constitution changed. I'm not going to say that's going to be easy, but short-term, during funding time, we all need to take a field trip to the.
So the state obviously funds is responsible for funding a great portion of our school. However, the city and the county also have responsibilities to ensure your kids have access to quality education as well as the services that they need and families need. So some things that some places have done, like Cruises New Mexico, they have pushed for a city tax it's very minimal, I think it's like 0.5%. City tax, that funding goes towards like supporting their community school models, which then supports mental health services for families. Things like the Kids on Course and the Boys on Girls Club, those wraparound services, as well as other educational opportunities and healthcare things. So that is something like being more creative and not holding our schools only to the state and federal government and our local property taxes to be funded, but also look at what can the state, our city and counties can do. Whether, I mean, taxes suck, but that's how we fund our services.
Our wonderful mayor's here. I'm not putting you on the spot, but are there? Hey, look, we hung out at your meeting with the baseball game. We had a good time.
Kelly, would you say a little bit more about the community school model and how and funding that's needed for that, and how a community would even look at that and approach that?
That's a lot of.
Well,
so okay. Because I'm highly involved in my union, and I'm a former Milwaukee public school teacher, when we faced the mayoral takeover of our school district, and was the first district in the country to fight one off to be successful, the community school model came out of engaging the parents and communities members in Milwaukee. So I've been following that for a very long time, and so I have access to be able to go and do conferences by the National Education Association where this is something that we are truly support and model, because it's going back to making our schools the heart of our communities, and not just for our students and our families, but also the community as a whole. If there is a veteran group that needs a meeting place, you have it at the school. If there is a clinic that needs to be built in a community, you put it at the school. And so there is federal money, and part of, and I believe this current budget that just passed the House, it has grants that you can apply for that are for the comprehensive fully comprehensive community school model, which is a 5-year grant, I believe it is, of up to like $5 million, just like $1 million. So then you can expand the model to other things. This is what Hoover is currently has adopted, because I have. So anyway, so the idea is that everything, the school is the hub of our community. Like if we need to have, a lot of our friends are taking ALL classes, so learning how to speak, so Catherine McCauley or Kirkwood could actually offer classes at our school. Our buildings would be open almost 24/7, 7 days a week, ideally, as we continue to expand and add things. So that's one funding stream that we can apply for as grants to the federal government. I believe they've opted in the House to be $40 million that's available, which is, a starting point, and now brings it even with charter schools. But whether that passes the Senate is a whole other story. So then that's where other places like in Milwaukee, they do the United Way fundraising that the United Way does every year. They have their community schools is another stream that you can put money towards. And like Krista said, I mentioned they've passed a city tax. So as the model is expanding and you're getting great results, especially at middle school and high school levels, communities are getting behind it, and they're finding ways to make the funding more sustainable, so that way the model can be sustainable.
Well, to be clear, I wasn't trying to put the mayor on the spot.
Yeah.
I just feel that this is. But this is an opportunity, right, to have a meeting and learn about the other community, right?
No, and you might not know anything about the full service community school funding or model. There's another source of funding that I think that, like, as a city, we're not taking full advantage of, and it's because I don't know the reason why, but I think it's because we have a great relationship with a community organization that's providing the services, but like 21st century after-school funds. We have some schools who have after-school programming that are funded through that. Some of, I think, but if the district as an entity were to apply for those schools, and they were to apply based on the needs of the schools, instead of having like 50 kids out of 450 at a school that were accessing after school services, it could probably double or triple. But because of just history and, okay, we have this good partnership and it's working in these schools, so just leave it alone, then our families are not accessing that service for their kids. And so I think looking at it as a district to apply for funding for that across the board, so there's more after-school programming in our schools.
So 21st century funding apply district, not as a single school?
Not through one specific organization.
Yes.
Coming from being, I'm a community member, and it just struck me that we just had a recent Supreme Court decision to move $2 billion from Department of Defense to the border wall. So I think that opens up a big door for us to get a couple $1 million to get here to Cedar Rapids School District.
Yeah, it does.
Legal minds might be able to follow that up. And that reminds me, going back to the 70s, there was a poster out that said, wouldn't it be great if the Department of Defense had to do bake sales to get a B-1 bomber, and all the money that was needed comes from the school district? Darn people.
So my suggestion is not on a larger scale, it's kind of on a smaller scale. And as I said, my son goes to Erskine, and we have an incredible PTA, and we don't do a ton of fundraisers, but we do fundraisers. And each year, I don't know if we can still do it, because I think it's kind of lost on what you can spend PTA money on too. But as we've done in the past, I know teachers have issues with coming out of pocket for things that they need in classrooms, is that we give teachers budgets for that, and then they just have to submit receipts, and we give them that money back out of the PTA fund. And I know that's like a big issue, like with the fidget spinners and, you know, those little fidget toys and stuff like that. But, you know, as a PTA, we just go ahead and give them a $100 budget for anything we need for the classroom, just submit receipts. So I know it's a small issue, but
I think along with that, some school buildings might need to revamp their PTA recruiting, because they might just have like 2 or 3 parents who've been doing it for years and are burnout. So like if you can get a more diverse group of parents and 15 people instead of 2 people who are working and doing fundraising, I think it was a great opportunity. So thank you.
Real quick, before we speak on it, may I ask somebody to talk about the Cedar Rapids Community School Foundation and what that does? I've been in this district most of my life, and I literally just found out about that like 6 months ago.
All the school districts have a foundation.
Oh, yeah, what does it do? How does it work?
So before I was on the school board, I was the board trustee. Before I was on the school board, I was a trustee on the foundation. So the foundation, as all the teachers in this room know, because I scream it from the treetops as often as I can, there is a grant that's called the Student Enrichment Fund, which does reimburse our teachers $250 they're spending out of their own pocket as long as they keep receipts, and that is to supply classroom needs. There's also grants that will help. There's this grant that's called SAFE. SAFE is Richmond Students Athletics, Fine Arts and Enrichment. So it pays for before and after school programming, so that there's never a financial barrier to like sports or band or anything that would be before and after school. There's grants for professional development if there's teachers that want to. There's like 3 of those. But for teachers to pursue additional training that they would designate on their own. So there's that, and then there are a bunch of student grants. The thing with the SAFE grants are they have to be applied for by the teacher on behalf of a student. So you can't like group apply for that, and you can't like apply for all of your labor. It has to be per student. So, but they're like 1-page grants, front and back. I mean, there's like maybe 12 or 15 questions. It's not at all cumbersome. What am I missing? All right.
So it says an overall awareness to the access.
Yeah, and the district also has innovation grants also that can come from within the buildings for kind of some of those similar things. I would say one thing is with this, we'll go back to whether it's foundation grants or within the district. Our teachers are not grant writers, and writing a grant is, or even filling out the application is, even if it's simple and you feel like you're asking like 5 simple questions, when it comes to money and a program or a project for a kid that they're like emotionally connected, it becomes stressful and overwhelming. And so thinking about easier access to those things. I don't know, I haven't looked at.
The only thing with the grants, so like the state grant, for example, I mean, it has to be applied for by staff because it does ask some questions that deal with student privacy. That deal with, you know, is this a child that's out of grade range lunch? So that's not really something we can ask a volunteer to do because we shouldn't have to share that information, that's privilege.
I guess I would just ask, like, do all the teachers know about these, and do they feel, are they aware, do they feel comfortable with the application process?
They're not hard to apply for. Sorry. The grants through the Cedar Rapids School Foundation. They're not hard to apply for. Some of them we're not aware of, like the Safe Ones one that you just told me about, and I immediately told our music and art teacher about it. So like the one with like the for materials that we purchase in our classroom, that one is like gone. All the ones use it real quickly. Like we make sure even our new hires are told about that one to make sure that they're, that's very expensive.
It sounds to me like.
So there's just some other ones that we're not as well as aware of, like the professional development one.
Right, and then the other one that I forgot, thank you, Leah, for reminding me, is field trips. So it's called, we have a partnership with Hills Bank, it's called Kids in the Community, and they do a tremendous job with partnering with us to pay, I believe it's like $250 per field trip, basically it covers the bus. And that's available to every teacher. Stand up and ask it.
I have more of a question that maybe, you said Hills Bank, why don't we reach out to more businesses around the community to help? For one, it's tax deductible, it's free advertisement because once a year, the schools or the school board can print out like a thank you letter, like these are the.
When you say we, who do you?
They're it up.
Yeah.
They're it up.
Yeah.
We ask a lot.
Well, and the reason I asked is because like my daughter just left Harding Middle School last year. She received a $250 check because of the way she played violin. The one who started in Kids on Chorus now received a scholarship for when she graduates high school because of that. If they can do that, and they also gave, I think it was from like Collins Community Credit, if they can give that, and they also give another $6,000 worth of, if they're doing that, why can't they help more?
Well, they can, I think she asked.
Yeah, we might be making an assumption that they're not, and I think with the number of nonprofit organizations and schools that are in this area, that those who might possibly give money are asked, and they probably give,
To the multiple organizations.
Yes.
My question is, in my community, why aren't people reaching out to community members to donate? And can we do that? Is there a thing that we can't give money to schools?
Yes.
But one thing is, it doesn't have to be a foundation. If I wanted to go down there and give them $100 at Johnson School, which I live down the street from, is there a process that I have to go through to give them money?
So there's these lovely buckets that Jennifer was speaking of earlier. There's tight regulation around how we accept dollars. And so usually it is with an entity that's, so this is the lovely part of the parent-teacher organizations or the PTAs and the PTOs. They help that process for us because they usually have a separate financial account. So when the donation comes, it goes to that organization, that helps fund the things for the school. So yes, it is very possible, and usually with that organization.
But they designate what it goes to, right? Like if I know a teacher that needs fidget spinners and I just want to buy her 30 fidget spinners.
So more than it, you can
I can just buy them and
Yep.
take them.
Yes.
That's my question.
There's a budget limit, so teachers cannot, if you wanted to say, I love you so much, I just want to give you $500 to get your hair done, we can't accept that. But there are donations that come to a school. The limit is, it's 25 at this point in time, is like the max in which an individual get a gift that's worth $25. So for example, many times schools will have book fairs.
Right.
You can buy a book at the book fair to be donated to the library, to be donated to a teacher's classroom, but cash itself cannot be donated.
So can we also, like most, if it's a PTA or if it's foundation or whatever, most entities will honor your request.
Like if you say, I want to give this $100, but I want it to be fidget spinners for this classroom,
Okay.
that PTA is going to want it.
Can we get that out there for the community to know?
Promoting that, right?
Question, tax deductibility.
Please stand, sir. Please stand.
I hope it's increased so donations are tax deductible that are made to the foundation. Some organizations do matching. Collins Aerospace does do a matching. If you're receiving something that's of value in exchange, that is deducted from your tax donation and deducted from your matching. Like for example, like if you're going to go to Lip Sync for Learning, which everyone should go every year. It's awesome.
So please help stand. So all of you, when you get ready to speak, so people can hear you.
Come on, you stand. So, but that's like a $50 ticket, but you get like show and drinks and food for that. So that would be not tax deductible.
How about PTA stuff? Is that tax?
PTA or 501c3s, they are tax deductible.
Okay, Michelle can stand for a little bit.
Oh, it's okay, just going back to the grant, because you don't have anyone, I just want to bring Samara actually, grant writer, and she's in Des Moines, and I think I can give you her card.
Thank you.
Because, and she will, you can talk to her about doing it, anyone who wants to do a seminar. She was excellent, I have all the information, and I mean, she made it so we can write our own grants.
Are you certified now to write grants?
No. You know, you said go with what you're good at. I'm good at your information. So I will get the information to you because she did it, and it was at the church actually, and she did it, and it was fantastic. She's written grants for a lot of people. Okay, thank you.
So it sounds like what we actually need is a database where teachers can go and actually see what resources are available. And not just for teachers, but also for parents, where somewhere where they can go and just see that these resources are available. So it sounds like a lot of people, they need this, oh, but we have this, you know, and we need to really take stock of those things that we have out there so we can see, okay, what can we fund now, what do we need, you know, because it seems like a lot of people are like, oh, I need this, and they're like, oh, but we have this, and we have this, and it's like, well, if nobody knows about it, then there's that problem.
Making those connections.
Yeah, if we make those connections, then we can go down the list and say, we really don't have this program.
And it might not be a list, it might be a role.
Yeah,
It might
a
be
role,
a
a person, a database, you know, something that, you know, even for parents, we can pass that out at back to school night. These are, you can pass it out to every student, so it's not like, oh, these are, you know, but these are resources we have here at school for every student. You can get this ADA if you want somebody to talk to go into meetings with you, you know.
And I'll say again, there's ways to utilize students to do this that love computers and can get credit.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in high school, the kids got credit to build houses, right?
Yeah.
Do they still do that? Yeah, so we give them credit to build a database and build a house in 24 hours.
She's been here.
Yeah.
Also, don't forget her. She's been asking for a long time too.
Back home in Illinois, our church was writing grants. We tried it. Then we set into a group. There's a lot of money out there. But you need somebody's important name on it also. And we told them we wanted our money to be big enough to pay for people $10 an hour, 20 hours a week to work with kids after school. And all kids were invited. So once we got that 2 million, the 2 million just keep rolling. But it takes a while to get it. And you can write it yourself and stay up lots of nights.
No, she's been trying to say something.
So this may be information that people already know about, but Silos and Smokestacks has a bus grant. So I don't know if you're familiar with Silos and Smokestacks, but and it's specific to their heritage sites. So like mostly park sites, but the African American Museum is one of their sites. And so teachers can apply for the grant on their website, and you would identify where you want to go. It has to be a partner site. Another one, oh man, I had 3 thoughts. GoFundMe, but there's a teacher one. I can't remember the name of it. it was very big for a while, then I
There's
started.
donors shoes, and then there's also adaptive classroom. Most teachers in Cedar Rapids are using donors shoes, so those are individual projects or projects for classroom teachers. They can also be used to raise money for field trips and also professional development opportunities. Unfortunately, like a lot of our projects can be pretty expensive, so they aren't always necessarily funded, so that's heartbreaking. But those are two things that, there are a lot of teachers that are putting projects out on their shoes, and adaptive classroom.
The last resource was at the library. Well, there's a subscription-based database of grants, but you can use it, nonprofits and I'm sure schools can utilize that database for free at the library. You have to be physically at the library, downtown at the library, and you can, it's $200 a month for a subscription. But because the library has that resource, we can use it for free. So obviously you need a grant writer, but it at least tells you what resources are out there in terms of grants.
Thank you.
Leah McCord, I left elementary school. So I taught for 15 years, and one thing that I think with funding that we don't see a consistent funding stream for is playgrounds. We're just dependent on our PTAs and PTOs for that. And so we're getting a lot of kids with adaptive equipment needs, and I have no idea even where we, like I know about all these other funding sources we talked about, but where can we get our adaptive playground equipment needs? Thank you.
Rotary. Yeah, Rotary's another good. There's like 900. So I'm gonna go this way for final comments, and then we're gonna need to wrap up because we've got one little thing. I'm gonna go this way plus you, and then we'll wrap up, okay? So go ahead.
I think something has to happen in terms of how school funding, they got different silos, different buckets that the school district spin out of. The legislature, we need to move for legislation to change about to give a little bit more flexibility in that area. And then also what needs to happen, which is per hours, anybody who comes from a family with more than one kid, who have more than one kid, know there's one kid that requires more attention than others. And I think that's something, I mean, it's fairly obvious, but that's something that we should acknowledge that more, and I think most people who got a heart will understand that. And then the last thing that we have to look at education in our kids as an economic and cultural investment in the future. We all need to clearly say that that's what this is. We talk about economic development in this town. We bring a company into town, but we don't have nobody that can work there. They got to bring people from outside the town to do it. Why can't we develop our own people? And again, I said it before, our students are the cultural, economic future of our community, and we should think of them. We should think of them in that way.
Invest. So yeah, we're looking for investors, not just grants, right? Thank you. That's a good point. Maxine?
That's just another question. Since there's such
Please stand.
since there's such a tight knit on how much you can spend when you if you donate to schools and stuff like that, is it illegal for if we were to get a whole different bucket and that's where people donate to, and then would the government or whoever decides what money goes to what place, would that take that person out?
I would say that the foundation might be doing some of that, but also think about all of the nonprofit organizations that are doing work in the schools or in the community that are working with youth, and all of them need money too. So if there's a certain, if it's an advocate, if it's an organization that gives advocates for youth in the school, then donate to them for them to do that work. Right? So there's many nonprofit organizations and social service organizations who are doing work with our youth. So the school has, they're specific with the budget, the federal funds and state funds that have to be spent a certain way, right? Through the PTA, if you're donating through the PTA to that specific school, then it's more relaxed, right? That you can kind of say what you want, or the PTA can kind of make decisions about what they're doing. Or you can support their fundraising efforts, right? The PTA fundraising efforts, which goes to show appreciation for volunteers and appreciation for teachers and to fund things like maybe playground equipment, that kind of thing. But if there's something specific that you would like to see happen in the schools, partner with a community organization that's working in the schools to provide counseling or to do training for the teachers and support them. So there's
So
a
for instance, like I could start an organization, the Not Without Me Foundation, and it gets donations and $1,000 dinner plates to raise money and stuff like that. And then when it gets to a substantial amount, we can start programs like after-school volunteering or volunteering for these kids in the schools that are in
You absolutely could, but from my short time at the foundation, I don't recommend anyone's, and from someone who started their own nonprofit and raised money and tried to keep things going, there's no reason to recreate the wheel. There are thousands of nonprofit organizations in this community who are doing good work. So like find what you're passionate about or what you'd like to see happen and volunteer with them and donate to them and encourage that work.
Okay, 5 minutes.
So, I want you to be aware of that cup, because you come real close.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's kind of stressed me out.
You slipped on the cup.
The other thing, I should probably, like my trustee, I should have remembered this part. There is one more grant that's pretty important, it's a building grant. It has to be applied for by principal, but that one runs anywhere from $12,000 to $25,000, and that is like if you're looking to really supplement or make like a big change.
So if a principal who does not want to write grants, doesn't know anything
No,
about
that-
grants,
the teacher writes it, that's
no interest. What if you have a school full of teachers and principals who that they're too focused on everything else they're doing? Like I'm just.
They will find time.
They'll find time if they really want.
I can tell you.
All right, one last one, and then comment, and then we'll.
So I visited a school in the south side of Chicago that went to like the lowest performing, the highest performing. And one of the things they did was to have kids buy time on the weekends to be at the school to play basketball or whatever it may be, by making them do a reading or math program for 20 minutes. So they bought time at the school to do what they wanted to do by really kind of pushing their education further. So if we can get something as simple as that in the schools, where when I'm at the schools, I see kids there a lot. Like if they're required to kind of pay for their education and then spend time, they have a safe place to be, and their education is rising.
So who pays for the supervision for the kids?
The principal was amazing, to be honest, and he was the one that was there the entire time. But when you have schools that are full of teachers that love the kids, you know, and people in the community that want to volunteer that are, you know, like, because of course we have great volunteers. You know, we could have a school member and maybe a volunteer come in. So the school member monitors the, and the first person monitors what's happening. And I don't know how it would happen, but it really did increase the education within that school.
Yeah. At the elementary level, there's rarely a Saturday or Sunday that there's not a teacher already at the school.
But they're doing stuff that they weren't able to do.
Absolutely. So let me go do my stuff and then I'll stay an extra hour and we'll rotate.
And there we go. I think that's a great, like, putting a system into place where it's not overwhelming, but where everyone can do that. So,
Yeah,
we have to wrap up. And our final forum is on Sunday, August 25th. Like I said, what I would love you guys to do before you go is, if any of you, so we're going to pull all this information together and we're going to present at a meeting in September. I'm not sure if we're on the agenda yet, because Nancy was going to do it. I think September 9th is one, and the second, there's another one later on in September, right? So on one of those, I volunteered, since I missed a number of these forums, to be the person to stand up and put these recommendations forward at the school board meeting. But I would love it if any or all of you would like to show up that time and say, yes, this is what community members did. I'm a witness. You can just be witnesses to that. Yes, these forums did happen. And yes, this is what we came up with as a community, as recommendations on how we can kind of have a shift in how things are going. And hopefully this year will be something amazing, some volunteerism, some parental engagement, some student achievement like we've never seen before, a shift just from this kind of movement, this Not Without Me movement is what we really hope to see. So any of you who are willing, please put your name and your phone number on there. I will call you with the date and time of the school board meeting and ask for your support as we're doing that. I also ask for, if you have an organization that needs volunteers, that you personally reach out to them and have them contact either any of us, right? Don't talk any of us. Just say, I need a table at the August 25th forum so that I can recruit volunteers for our youth in this community. Because we want to have this room full, and we want it to be a celebration and a time to sign up, and for everyone to be thinking about what, how they're going to be engaged over this next school year. So, all right, you guys, this was surpassed all expectations for what great information we knew you guys were holding on to, and then we knew you had more to share and more to clarify, and things that we hadn't even thought about or we don't know about. There's a lot of questions. There's so much more that we don't know that we're realizing that we do know. But this has been an amazing 6 months of learning, and I hope that each of you feel inspired to keep pushing forward, keep doing the good work that you're doing, keep know that you're not alone when you're teaching these kids, and that you have a community that supports you and that are behind you. And we just need to communicate better about what your needs are. We need to build relationships, get to know each other better, so that when we're working together with these kids, that we can interact and model the behavior we want to see with them. And we need to be engaged. We know that. And we also need to figure out some funding, so we can support the teachers, the school buildings, the admin teams, and volunteers to make this happen in community engagement. So thank you so much. I hope each one of you walk up, and I'm going to go get out and walk and sign up for more.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for coming up. Yes.
Time to act on August 25th.
I was going to be out of town.